Hello, it's me. I'm back again. It's been a while. Did you miss me? I assume not. Regardless, I'm here to talk about a very special individual. That individual is called Tomie. And actually, I'm here to talk about the movies. Specifically the first movie, a movie in which I have some theories and some ideas. The manga I'm not super familiar with, but I've grown very attached to the character, as you can see, by my fetching Tomie shirt here, which I bought from a Chinese store. It's acid wash, which is why it looks like that. It is also hairy because I have a very annoying dog, but I promise most of those colorations is not hair, it's that acid wash. Anyway, the point is, I'm here to kind of talk about the first movie specifically in the context of the character and in the context of the franchise, because to me, it's become a very personal, very meaningful movie, and I think it has a lot to say. And I think it's also something that you can look at and see so many small details that can change how it's supposed to be perceived, how it's supposed to be understood, and the thematic ideas and stuff. I'm only really going to be talking about a couple of these, but I think it's a brilliant movie worth talking about, and I'm super interested to hear what everyone has to say about how they felt like it came across and what they felt it meant like for the character. For me personally, it means a great deal, and I'm interested to tell you how I've kind of come across it. I haven't watched all of the movies yet, I'm getting through to them, but I've watched a good chunk, but this movie is special on its own, and I think it certainly warrants being talked about. So we'll do that now. I'm going to pre-warn in here that this review is going to be full of spoilers. Now, I'll start off by saying a small fact that I read, and I don't know if this is true. It feels like it probably is true, but it's all second-hand knowledge, and it's actually quite difficult to find a lot of the BTS for this movie, and a lot of information about how it was filmed and what was done. But one of the things I've read a few times is that Junji Ito was very involved in the making of this movie. So any kind of intention for the character is probably pretty true to the source. Equally, I have also heard, again, I can't prove it, it's second-hand information, but I've also heard that he specifically helped cast Miho Kano, who plays Tomie, and he also coached her on how to talk and how to move and how to be Tomie. So this is his truest interpretation. That's just my disclaimer before I go into it, because it's going to be relevant later on, and I can't really think of a way to work it into the script naturally. So I'm going to say it as a caveat that what happens in this movie and what goes on is likely his intention, and whichever way you decide to kind of take this movie, out of all of the movies, this is the closest probably to what he wanted. Obviously the manga is his truest vision. That was written and designed by him from the ground up, but as a live action character, certainly this is what his intention is, and I think it's good to clarify something in motion. You can certainly get a different perspective on it, and maybe there's something new, but I think there's a lot of people who kind of took the character for the way that I'm going to take it here, and I also think, which means it's not necessarily the realm, but I also think that I certainly think that there's a lot of different interpretations you can make for the character, and as a result, a lot of the films have also taken different paths and different ideas to how they kind of see the thematic resonance of the story and the ideas of it and how it should be played out and what it all means. And so, yeah, that's my caveat going in, that this is possibly very close to the original vision and the original source. So, Tomie is righteous, I think. She is kind of like a representation of this collective experience that women go through. When you think about who Tomie is and her story, for those who aren't aware, Tomie is essentially this supernatural being who cannot die. She is constantly killed, but always comes back, pretty much. She also has the powers of making everyone fall in love with her, or turning everyone insane. And she also has a bunch of other powers, but, those are the main ones. Those are the ones people tend to talk about. The thing about Tomie is that when you think about her life and who she is and what she went through, I think you have a very interesting picture of a character. And I think it kind of frames the frustration, the kind of this collective feeling towards the idea that society is built to kind of frustrate, control, and demean and dominate women. This is kind of quite a feminist character, really. I think that she's an icon in that regard. And ultimately, in the movie, Sukiko the lead character's movie, Sukiko, is a great representation of that fact. She kind of represents the idea that not only do men want to control, demean, and crucify women, but they also can't control Tomie, and that's what drives them insane. And that's what causes so much havoc. She is a independent character. She is representational of the kind of fiercely independent, true to themselves, outspoken women who also is frustrated and fed up with the fact that every person in society is trying to use and manipulate her. And this is, I think, the thematic relevance of the character, and especially the thematic relevance of the film. In the movie, we follow a character called Sukiko, and Tomie kind of represents Sukiko's own personal vendetta, because Sukiko is a character who is perfectly nice, and she is a photographer, and she's doing hypnotherapy because of an accident she was in the past, and she's got, some friends, a boyfriend. But really, the whole movie is about how everybody kind of treats Sukiko very poorly. From her first friend, the first person we see in the movie who insults her and treats her a bit like garbage, her other friend who is perfectly nice but cheats on her, and her boyfriend, the little shit, who is cheating on her, like I say, and also demeans her at every possible opportunity. He doesn't really tolerate her talking about her hobbies. He doesn't like talking to her about her hobbies. He doesn't really listen to her or take her seriously or pay attention to her. He's frustrated whenever she talks, but he keeps her around because she's useful to him. She's useful to have a girlfriend, to have the normalcy. She's useful to she's an object to him, something that he owns and something that he doesn't really care for, but something that he wants to have and keep. There are also two other minor characters who briefly influence her negatively. There's her landlord, who heavily implies that she is partly responsible for a troublesome neighbour moving out, and also kind of implies that she better treat him nice, as if to say, because she's a woman, if she treated the creep nice, maybe he wouldn't have been, caused so many problems. It's not really clear specifically what happened between her and this previous neighbour. And then we've got the hypnotherapist, who quite smugly turns away her whole idea of trying to figure out what happened in her past. She's like, don't worry, but who cares? Don't bother with it. It's not worth your time. And Sukiko is somebody who is very easily controlled. She's another one who doesn't really like to upturn things, especially considering she had an accident. So she's very accommodating, and she's like, well, yeah, even though figuring out her past is so important to Sukiko, it's such a key part of her character's motivation throughout the movie is figuring out her past and figuring out how to sleep and get through it. And the hypnotherapist who is supposed to be helping her figure out her past is like, just give up, who cares? And ultimately, all of these people are the people who are targeted by Tomie. Tomie is not so. She's cruel, she's manipulative, and she doesn't do appropriate punishments, really. If your crime is being demeaning to your girlfriend, I don't necessarily think you deserve to go insane or die or have to commit murders as a punishment or have all of your friends die. But Tomie is a nuke. She comes in and she decimates an area, and she's cruel. And she sees a lot of herself in Tomie. The whole movie is about the kind of the similarity between these two characters. It's a very key point in the film. And I think that that's true in many, many different ways. But Tomie is ultimately a character who, when you think about her history, we never see the original Tomie. We never see how she became this way or ever she was born this way. We know that typically spiritualism in Japan, usually these kinds of creatures are spawned from somebody dying in a way where there's unresolved business, where there's a lot of vengeance to kind of come from it. So we can understand that Tomie probably did live a life similar to the way that she does as a ghost, but possibly not who she was now. She doesn't really seem to know why she exists, and she doesn't really seem to know what she wants to achieve. Ultimately, you have to kind of put yourself into her shoes and imagine what it must be like for the first Tomie ever to be probably a quite nice girl who everybody obsessed over, who wants to use and control and take ownership of, and every girl hating her because of the way the men in society are treating her and obsessing over her because they're jealous of the favoritism she's getting. Hated her on both fronts, and then ultimately killed, and then becoming a spirit, or however you would describe her, having to go through that over and over again. It's kind of no surprise that Tomie is cruel, or that she's a nuke, or that she kind of decimates the world around her, or that her opinion of men especially is very negative, especially since they're the root cause of all of this stuff. But Tomie is I think a little bit more guided than sometimes we give her credit for. In the movie she states men are worthless animals, and that is true. But I don't think Tomie's ability actually is to have all men fall in love with her. I think Tomie acts more of a Venus flytrap kind of a situation. Now, this is just a theory, and it's something that I found was really interesting and something that I noticed myself. I don't know how true it is. I'd love to. If you speak Japanese, you can talk to me in the comments below and give me your thoughts on the situation. There's a scene in the movie in a restaurant where Tomie is trying to manipulate Sukiko's boyfriend Saiga, the little shit. And she is talking in a very specific way. And keep in mind that this is, according to that, if that information is true, that second-hand information, this is how Junji Ito wanted her to be coached to speak, to approach these scenes. This is the only scene in the movie where she really talks like this. She consistently uses this sentence fragment yo, and that's not necessarily uncommon. People do use that, and some people use it fairly frequently. But she uses it so much in this moment that it really stood out.
泣いてたわよ。嫌よ。この人変態よ。立ちっぱなしで足が痛いよ。何よ。
And I'm not a Japanese speaker, but I obviously have watched a lot of movies. I pick up certain words, and so it's interesting to kind of hear these words pronounced with this different inflection. So I did some research and I looked it up. I couldn't find a lot of stuff on my own, and eventually spoke to some people on Reddit of all places. I tried to contact some language experts. I believe I spoke to someone from Japan, and he essentially told me that, and I'll be clear, I tried to ask this with as little bias as possible. I didn't want to influence the results of what someone might say based on their own thoughts on the character. I simply asked the question, if somebody was using this sentence particle a lot in conversation, what would that imply about their character? That's all I asked. And this guy, who was from, I believe from Japan, or at least a fluent speaker, told me that yo essentially acts as kind of a softer way of saying something. So if you were to say iayo, which is what Tomie says in the scene, it would act as kind of a soft refusal, as if you're saying no, but you're not super confident about the no. He said that somebody who uses this sentence particle a lot would be, to him, he would take it as somebody who is more easily controlled or dominated. Somebody who is essentially like prey. They're opening themselves up for the idea that, or they're written in a way that opens themselves up to make them look like, to other people, someone who they can take advantage of. He then told me about this historical saying that older men in Japan used to say, and it's very similar to a phrase I'm sure you've heard over here. It essentially translates to iayo means yes. As if to say, when a woman were to say no that way, then it would be okay to sexually assault her because she still wants to do it, because it's not a real refusal. And I found that really fascinating. And thematically, it really fits to me with the premise of the movie. So while it might be me overthinking stuff, and I might just be, noticing something that's actually very common and reading way too much into it, she does only really do this in this scene. And in this scene, she's specifically trying to manipulate Saiga. And if that's true, and if what we've said about Junji writing the character and coaching the actress for this role is true, then that kind of, to me, implies that Tomie actually doesn't target all men. Not all men fall in love with her. In fact, she specifically targets predatory men by acting like prey. And they're driven insane by the fact that once they realize that while she's indicating that she can be controlled with her language, she actually cannot be controlled. They're either driven insane, or they're compelled to do what she says to get her into a position where she can be controlled. That's how she manipulates people. And this theory is I think this theory is bolstered by another one of the movies. Again, it's not a direct continuation. It's not the same, writers. It's not the same directors. But because it's based on the same character, and because Junji was involved in himself in the film, it kind of implies that, the consistencies that you might see, or the other things you might see, could still be relevant here. One of these movies is made by Takashi Shimizu, and it's one of the best ones because Tomie is in the movie for a lot of the movie, and she's constantly talking to people, and she's such a diva. I love her. But in this movie, Tomie makes a ton of people fall in love with her. And throughout the course of the movie, they do what she wants. But there is one character who doesn't fully commit to her manipulation and is able to see through it and protect his girlfriend, the one who he really loves. Tomie is a little more evil in this movie. Her actions don't necessarily represent kind of a feminist force to protect women like they do here. But I think that's a really interesting little character quirk, because if it's based on the same character, it's based on the same writing that Junji Ito made for his manga, then it does kind of imply that Tomie actually can't make everybody fall in love with her, which is supposed to be one of her powers. Instead, she makes predatory men fall in love with her, which makes the movie and the franchise kind of a powerful statement that most men, if not all men, are predatory. Because even he, because some of his creepiness is there, even he struggles to kind of fight her off, but he's good enough that he's able to. But if you've even a slight bit of a creep, she will take control. And it's evidenced by the fact that she doesn't necessarily care about the small crimes, because she'll punish you even if all you did was demean a woman once, I feel like. So she is like a creep magnet. She's a Venus flytrap for creeps. And it just so happens that every man in pretty much every Tomie property is a creep, so that none of them are immune to it. And I think that's a very powerful kind of thematic resonance to it. In the movie, she constantly talks about how Sukiko is her. I say constantly, she's not actually in the whole movie. She talks a lot about how Sukiko is her. And I think that is fundamentally true. When you think about the origin of the character and the fact that she was likely somebody who was treated the way Sukiko was before she died, possibly a lot worse, then she probably does see the exact same pattern. Sukiko is also somebody who uses the Yo fragment pretty frequently, whereas Tomie only actually uses it when she wants to manipulate. Sukiko is somebody who consistently gets walked over in the movie. Sukiko is somebody who the men kind of perv over, or at least her boyfriend does, despite the fact that he doesn't really care about her, and she's someone who the girls resent. She is, for all intents and purposes, thematically Tomie, outside of the kind of the physical and literal essence that she might be Tomie in the movie's context of story. And I think that means, and I think that kind of showcases this idea that Tomie is a reference for her own frustrations, which leads me to a different theory where Tomie physically, there's a theory that I have, it's not one that I choose to believe because I like the physical character, but there's a theory that I have that the physical Tomie that we see in the movie is actually never there, and it's all Sukiko the whole time. Tomie has a bunch of powers though, and she's an interesting character with a lot of lore and history, and they played up to the idea that for one reason or another, Sukiko is becoming Tomie or is relevant to her. I think Tomie sees Sukiko as kind of an ally in the fight against worthless men, and Tomie doesn't care anymore. She's cruel and she's vindictive and she is a little evil because of her history, rather than being someone who's actively fighting for good. As much of an anti-hero as she can come across in the situations where she is fighting gross men, she still cruelly picks people apart and takes people up for minor crimes, and even tries to punish Sukiko in the kind of torturous sequence where she has her tied and delivers her monologue to her, which is brilliant, by the way. But I think what she wanted to do in that sequence was open Sukiko's eyes and have her join her. Tomie is a character who, because of what we know about her, we know how her stories are going to go down. And by the end of the movie, we see where it's going. She makes this kind of, she admits it to Tsukiko and she laughs with her, and I think there's like a real connection there. Tomie as a character is fascinating, really. Outside of the thematic reasoning, this scene is interesting to me because there's many different ways to kind of see it. And I think Sukiko chooses to kill Tomie on the pier at the end. And Tomie looks sad. The actress' performance is brilliant. There's a real sadness in her eyes that isn't present in the other scenes. She looks really convincingly sad. But I think that's interesting because I think a lot of people would look at it and go, she's sad because she's being killed. But Tomie doesn't care about being killed. She was killed earlier in the movie. She knows she doesn't die, and she's killed consistently. She might not like it, but I don't think she'd be actively sad about it. There's plenty of other instances in Tomie, like, stories and continuity where she's, like, beheaded and talking and not in pain. So I don't necessarily think that, you know, she's upset about being killed. She's upset because Sukiko is kind of rejecting the fight against gross men and tries to go back to it. And the movie kind of makes a point to make it that Tomie doesn't go away, as if to say, once you've opened that barrier and you start seeing what men can and do, there's no way to turn off that kind of internal struggle with it. Sukiko is always going to sit there and know how her boyfriend treated her. She's always going to see the men around her and know that they're manipulating her, and that when men manipulate her and they get what they want, other girls are angry at her because of the favoritism she's being shown or whatever else. The movie doesn't outrightly say a lot of these stuff. I think this is a brilliant movie because of stuff like that. There's so many different details. In fact, I could probably talk about this movie all day. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites now. And there's so many little details like that that build up this like compelling narrative of how she is like this almost angelic force of destruction against kind of creepy predatory behavior. It's evil and it's unquantifiable. The stories are not necessarily interesting because you know how they're going to end. All of the stories are the same. You know that she can't be killed, so it's not like people can really fight against her. You watch them because you want to kind of, you take her in as a character and you fall in love, which is fascinating that the movie and the franchise is about a girl who everyone falls in love with, and it's hard not to really fall in love with her attitude. But it's also, it's also kind of a thing where the compelling nature of her as a character and what happens in these movies is not based around what happens. It's about the thematic resonance for what she's trying to achieve, because she really does feel like this kind of unquantifiable, uncanny force that appears to kind of wreak justice, kind of like Noah's flood, right? She's clearing the area every time there's an overdraft spell of misogyny or shitty behavior. And granted, in a lot of the movies, she just kind of shows up to perfectly normal people's lives. But I think that's kind of the point, that misogyny and, you know, patriarchal structures are normal, and they happen every day, and they happen to everyone. And I think that makes it makes this movie totally fascinating to me. And the thing is that that's not the only way to see it. Even reading online, not necessarily just about the movie, people really debate what Tomie means, what it's about, what message it's trying to come across. And it's a tragic and sad tale that also, to me, happens to be like about this kind of internal, like it's a very like building and powerful feeling. And Tomie comes in through the movie, slowly manipulating the scenes, becoming one with Sukiko and really feeling her pain and understanding her struggle, even though she's cruel, vindictive, and doesn't care. Tomie is someone who she also tortures because she is a cruel instrument, ultimately, at the end of the day. But that torture, like I say, to me feels like she's going, wake up. This is how people treat you. This is what the world is like. Saiga is a little shit. People will treat you the way I'm treating you because of the systems that are in place. And if you look at it from the other theory I had, then this could really just be Sukiko self-loathing over the fact that she's been treated this way, or self-loathing over the fact that she's had to take vengeance this way. And so I will talk briefly about that other theory, because I think it is interesting. Like I say, it's not the one that I choose to do, but I think it's really interesting to see how many different ways this movie can be interpreted, because it really does feel like an open book. And there's a lot more that I haven't talked about, like a lot of different ways that you could do it, but these are the ones that I think about the most. Because ultimately, everybody who was killed is related to Sukiko, outside of the three guys in the restaurant, but they could just be collateral damage or punishment for Saiga, perhaps. They're all related. Everything that happens is related. But there's other evidence to suggest that Sukiko is not normal throughout the whole movie. She's assumed to be weird. There's definitely something off about her. She's doing hypnotherapy and she takes a lot of pills, so her sense of reality isn't necessarily 100% either. She's also somebody who sometimes suffers delusions and weird dreams. But there's a couple of moments specifically that stand out. One moment I always think about is the moment where she's taking the picture with Saiga with the teddy bear. She says two things. The first being, one of my friends may have done something bad to me. I can't tell you what it is, it's a secret. It's a weird thing to say in general, but it also kind of implies that she knows that Kairi and Saiga are sleeping together. And I think it kind of implies that while the movie kind of portrays it that she doesn't know, it gives you enough reason to know that she does know about the cheating. Therefore, there's enough information there for her to take vengeance against Kairi rather than it just being a random Tomie act. If she knows, then she has motive. She then says, "You wouldn't betray me, would you?" Which really feels like the kind of thing Tomie would say right before she manipulates people. I just want to pause here and just say I'm sorry for saying her name differently so many times. I think it's supposed to be Tomie. I've been saying Tomie since reading it. Is what it is. I'm trying to keep it consistent. I'm sorry. So she... Just side note. But yeah, so she knows about it, and she's... This is the kind of weird language that makes it seem manipulative and weird, that she knows exactly what she's doing. You wouldn't betray me, would you? She knows that he has. She's being Tomie, she's being weird. And even Saiga in this scene is like, that's a really weird thing to say. And it is out of character for her as a character. Later on in the movie, after the body is found for her first friend who dies, the one who she believes destroys her bike, Kairi comes to her house and she says, "Hey, did you hear?" She's like, "No, I didn't hear." She says, "Nanio," because she also uses the sentence fragment quite frequently. And then Kairi leaves and Tomie follows her down the street, and then she is the next person to be killed. But the way Kairi reacts to her saying no almost makes it seem like there was something about Sukiko in that scene that we, the viewer, couldn't see, that Kairi could see, that implied she does know despite what she's saying, and maybe she's responsible. Maybe she's, involved. And then it's no surprise Tomie immediately kills her afterwards, following her after Sukiko looks at her leave, as if that's Sukiko herself taking on Tomie and following her through the thing. And then by the end of the movie, there's this brilliant kind of like visual thematic relevance where obviously she develops photos, but the hypnotherapy bulb is this bright, like orange, dark orange, like kind of red bulb. The bulb that she uses for her photography makes a red light, but when you actually see the bulb at the end of the movie, it's the same bulb. And then the picture reveals Tomie's famous mole under her eye. I realise my camera is flipped, so it would be here. And it also, that's when Tomie comes back, as if the hypnotherapy has awakened Tomie inside of her. It's awakened, and then the accident in the past could have been her doing all this stuff to these kids, and that's why the body wasn't found. That's why Tomie isn't there, because she was doing this stuff. And when Tomie is torturing her, she shows her the picture, the Monster Girl picture. She hates being called Monster Tomie. She really, really hates it. It's one of so consistent in it. There's a few things that happen consistently to Tomie is she doesn't like being called a monster, and she says she won't forgive people. Those are some real hallmarks of hers that I've come to pick up upon. But she shows her this picture, and the picture isn't really that clear. That could just be Sukiko. Maybe Sukiko was bullied in the past and created these actions, and this is it happening all over again. And that would still explain why Tomie was upset, because she would be like, why won't you accept me and let me into your life? It's going to keep happening. People are going to keep treating you like garbage unless you embrace the fact that this is who you are, really. It's a brilliant movie, I think. And just to talk about it from a movie's perspective, I'm going to forewarn people who haven't seen it. I think you should have listened to the spoiler warning near the start, but if you ignored the spoiler warning, this movie it's beautifully shot, but it is a very slow burn. It's got a real hazy atmosphere to it. It's very dreamlike. It's very slow. It has beautiful music that really swells with the atmosphere. There's this one song called Robbie's Song, which is unnerving and strange and distorted, but it has this beautiful melody to it. It feels exactly like what Tomie is as a character. She's this distorted, strange character who's beautiful and you know.
This is Editing Brad here, just with a quick fun fact. Robbie's song, the song I was just talking about, is actually playing in the movie for the characters, not just for us, the viewers. It's not background music. So every time you hear the song in the movie, it's physically playing in the film. Sukiko can hear it through the walls. Tomie appears to always be listening to it. It's playing in the scene where Kairu's body is found. In fact, you can tell that it's really playing in this scene because they literally show you the stereo that it's playing from. And funnily enough, it gets distorted when Sukiko's head is put under the water, and then she hears it clearly when it's out again, because it's playing in the scene. It's never a song that just plays in the background, which is I can't really even begin to comprehend what that choice may mean, but I love it. It's fascinating.
The movie ultimately works despite the slow burn because it's all about when will we get to see Tomie. We see glimpses of her, we see her from behind. They don't reveal her face for ages, and when they do the first time, it's in darkness in the restaurant scene, which is brilliant. And then we get to see Tomie in the end, and her character is so unique. Her presence, the way she talks, the way she handles the scene as a creature, as like a spirit she is, utterly compelling to watch. And that's what makes the movie, even without looking at all of the details, and even without thinking about the kind of the swelling, you know, pro-woman, anti-misogyny energy that exists, the kind of misandrist nature of this franchise swells so brilliantly. Even without that, you still get, like, granted a slow burn, but a lush, beautifully sounding, beautifully acted movie that features a truly stunning performance by the end.
Hey there, Editing Brad here on a different microphone, so I'm sorry about the different audio quality, and I'm sorry for any background noise. I just want to butt in just to be very clear, because I don't think I was clear enough. The performance of the actress playing Tomie, Miho Kano, is flawless. I definitely didn't say strongly enough how good this performance is. Every little movement is so strange and so unique and feels so purposeful that makes her feel like an otherworldly entity while still remaining, you know, the beauty of who she's supposed to be. You could definitely see her as somebody who's easy to fall in love with, who's easy to kind of fall for from her independent spirit and her movements, but also at the same time you can definitely tell that she is otherworldly, that she is totally something else. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen, and I definitely didn't sell it enough when I was talking about the positives of the movie. She is fantastic. I can totally see why Junji Ito headhunted her, if that is what he did, because she's amazing. She's 100% one of the best. It's one of the best performances I've seen, possibly ever. I absolutely love it. It's the highlight of the whole film.
Which, if she was coached by Junji Ito, means that he's created a truly compelling character. And I kind of agree with him if that's the case, because I can't think of anybody who they could possibly cast who could do better, who matches it better. The way she talks is so good. The way she moves so deliberately is so good. There's something so uncanny about her. It all builds up, and I think the first time I watched it, I did think it was a little slow. But in the end, I found myself feeling like the slow build-up was why her reveal is so good, why she's so compelling, why when you first hear her talk and you first see her, you know, react to stuff, it's magnetic, it's wonderful, right? It's powerful, it's exactly what you want. I love the character. I love to see her, and that's ultimately why the Shimizu one works so well as well, because while it might not have the same depth or little details or things like that, you get so much of the character in that movie, and she's going around and interacting with people, and she's throwing up to restaurants like, hey, your boyfriend killed me yesterday, just causing havoc in everyone's life. She rules. I'm afflicted by the Tomie curse. I think the director of the first movie is definitely, he made another one where it really feels like he kind of loves what she's all about, even though he thinks she's cruel and strange. He's all about it. And so I think the movie itself is really wonderful. It's a really unique, brilliant experience. It doesn't throw twists your way because you know where it's going to go. You know what the story is, especially if you're aware of the character. Everything that happens in it is exactly what you expect. She shows up, people fall in love with her, they go crazy, some of them die, and then she dies. Like in every possible telling of her franchise. But that's not why you're there. That's not what makes it work. When I watched it with a friend, I've watched it with a few friends, usually I get the response of like, sometimes it's pretty negative, but sometimes it's positive, but it's like they don't really see or feel to look into it the way that I have, or, you know, kind of the stuff doesn't resonate in the same way. But I watched it with this one friend who said to me, and I always think about this because to me it really feels relevant to what the energy of the film is all about. She said, that's because they're not girls. A girl would get it. And I think that to me, it sounds silly to say, but that kind of sums up basically my whole thesis about the thematic energy of this movie, that a girl would get it. I think that there's tons of little details that point towards the idea that Tomie is not just a creature who shows up and causes havoc. She is a righteous character who is misandrist, sure, but hates misogyny, who hates creeps and hates gross men and hates the women who ultimately bend over backwards to help support these men, like Kyrie. And while she doesn't pick her targets necessarily well, I think you can kind of see the frustration of women who will bite kind of small infractions of, mansplaining or whatever, because they've had to endure so much of the stuff Tomie's had to endure, where she's been objectified, sought after, tried to be controlled and hated, and that even now the smallest thing drives her mad. She's like the movie is like a big representation for a earth-wide struggle that women have gone through dealing with men like this. And I think it's really effective. And in the narrative of the movie with the character where you get to see them, it's almost like it's cathartic, I think. It's cathartic to see a character come out there and call it out for what it is, and sure, go too far, but it's the same you kind of get when you watch any kind of revenge flick, right? You see something terrible happen and then you see someone take them out and you're like, yes, they deserve it. Like they're shocked to the system, even if you don't necessarily think they deserve to be killed. You're like, the kind of palpable righteous punishment of it all, it makes her kind of like a holy entity, and because she's a spirit and because she has these powers, it makes it feel divine, I think. That's the way I see it. Like I say, I could talk about it for ages. I don't even think I necessarily explained it as well as I could have done, or that I explained it everything that possibly leads up to this, or all of the little details. Even in my reviews for the movie on Letterboxd, I've totally scattered. I'm just rambling because I feel like there's so many little details that pill it all together, and the language thing is such a small thing, and it's something that you don't get in the English subtitles. And if I'm right about it, which I hope so, and certainly all of the evidence for how the movie is, and I might have thought that I was thinking too deeply into it if it didn't match the energy of the movie too well. And when you've got little things like that are easy to miss, it's brilliant. And it makes me think that even though I watched the movie with Junji Ito's involvement and the fact that it's his character, it makes me think that he is a very subtle and talented writer, and maybe his writing is better than any English speaker really knows, because maybe the translations, even if they're amazing, still don't really portray the kind of nuance and details shown in what he's actually writing. And I think he's created a classic talented character. I don't know a huge deal about the guy. Like I say, I don't particularly read a lot, and I certainly don't read comic books or manga. But I'm fascinated by the guy, and it's the kind of character that I've fallen so in love with now that I probably would read the manga. I'm so obsessed with the character. I think she's amazing. But I think that this almost kind of, to me, portrays him as being this kind of really progressive individual, someone who, as far as I know, based on the Hello Kitty collabs with Tomie, is a father of daughters, someone who probably really strongly believes in women's rights, someone who really can see the frustration and understand them, a very empathetic individual. And I hope that in real life he's not a scumbag. So many of these, people, they write stories like this and then you find out they're a scumbag. I'm hoping that the story is a strong reflection of the fact that he really does feel alongside, the women of the world, the frustration of every individual piece of small pieces of control that men try and assert over you, and the frustration coming back around in such a powerful way. All these because like I said, the stuff that happens in the movie, it's not like big stuff. Her boyfriend scoffs at her because she tries to, do her hobby, taking photo at lunch. And it's a tiny little thing. But it's like, if you're a woman and you're dealing with that every day, the frustration builds up and it's powerful, and it becomes something like Tomie, who is overwhelmingly powerful in response to such a small thing because it happens so frequently. And I love that he's able to see that, and I feel that myself. You know, I'm not trying to say I'm an particularly empathetic individual, that I'm like I'm in the woman's mind or whatever, but certainly like that speaks to me. You know, I have like everyone else, I've got a mother, and for me personally, I think I see the struggles a lot for women, and I always feel like I want to support them. And I think that this movie is like, it really speaks to the kind of the frustrations that I see in women I know, in my friends, in my family, right? And it's just in kind of the treatment that you kind of see in general of people disregarding women's opinion, not taking them seriously, trying to control them, objectifying them, or whatever else. This movie puts it in the forefront, and it speaks to me really well. And if there are other men out there who are watching this movie who've been moved by it, I hope that like maybe it puts it into perspective, the kind of the struggle of women. Maybe that's why it resonates so well with me. It's kind of like a feminist movie that is able to speak to men through the guise of ironically a beautiful woman, you know, who you fall in love with in Tomie here, right? But I also think that it could be a movie that could really speak to a lot of people in general. And I was really happy to get the perspective from a female friend, because that really changes everything. And she definitely felt like it spoke to her experiences. And well, maybe she didn't say that specifically. She just said she didn't really say a lot. She just said that, you know, girls would understand. And to me, that says that it kind of spoke to the experiences that she understands to have gone through, and she understands other women will have gone through, and they'll be able to relate to. And so Junji Ito feels like a very empathetic voice, and Oikawa, the director, also feels like someone who really understands it, someone who really feels it. A true woman lover, if you will. You know, we love women here, that's what we can say. And that's basically it. I've talked a lot at length about one small thematic detail about what Tomie represents as a power to women. And I also talked about a small theory about her being, you know, combined. And I talked about my language theory, which I think is really interesting. I really want to know more about that. If you speak Japanese, please comment and tell me what you think a character who uses that sentence fragment a lot might mean. Because I think it's because my research kind of suggests that it is thematically relevant. And if you think the same, that's great. If you think like the guy who I spoke to, that it would imply that a character is more easily dominated, then that's perfect. That backs up my theory completely. If you hear it and you think that just makes them more casual and lighthearted, then that's valid too. I'd love to I want different sources, you know, I want different pieces of information on it so I can truly understand what's going on. And this is kind of my own way. Ultimately I make videos not to inform or educate or entertain even. It's just kind of like to vent. It's like a personal diary. I come here because I want to talk about this movie, and I feel like nobody really wants to talk to me about it because everyone I've shown it to hasn't liked it as much, and I just want to say, I love this movie, I love what it says, I love the details and the nuance and the character. It's all great. I'm a huge fan, and that's what I'm saying here in this video, and I hope you feel the same. Like, comment, subscribe if you feel like you want to. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you feel the same. If you didn't, then, you know, well, I'm venting here, so it is what it is. But that's my long rant on the first Tomie movie. It's perfect. I'll see you next time. Who knows when? Clearly, it could be 9 months.